Dan Teasdale, what is your favorite game?
My favorite game is World Games. So I started first playing games uh, technically earlier than when I was like 5. Like I had a Spectrum and things like that, and I remember them existing, but I don't remember playing games on them. But my first real game-capable computer was a Commodore Amiga, and this I got because it's kind of a long story, but I grew up in Australia, and my grandparents lived in Papua New Guinea, which is the country above Australia. And while my mum was working during school holidays, I'd go visit my grandparents, and they'd take care of me. And one time I visited them, and it was near my birthday, and I got a bug catcher. And so my grandmother was like, "Hey, let's go and catch some bugs with this." And we go catch some bugs, and we walk straight into a nest of mosquitoes. And one of them, I only got 2 or 3 bites, but I remember very clearly one of them bit me on the back and like one on the arm. And then within about 48 hours, I started getting a fever, and I started losing track of time and things like that. And it turns out I'd caught malaria.
Ooh.
And it was cerebral malaria, which is like the basically 50-50 mortality chance once you get this thing within 7 days.
Oh, Jesus.
And it was 1985 when this happened, so no internet, WebMD kind of stuff. And so my grandmother basically called. This is me sort of piecing together what happened, kind of like 10, 15 years later. But my grandmother called a university in London and went, "Hey, my grandson just caught malaria. The doctor's in Port Moresby don't know what to do about this. What do I do?" And so they basically sent through, take these pills, get these medicine, take these every 4 hours. This crazy medicine regime. And so so she picked up this medicine and tried to give it to me, and it was absolutely disgusting. Like the most terrible tasting medicine you can ever have, trying to feed a 5-year-old so that they don't die. And to get me to take it, basically my mom and my grandmother were like, "If you do this, we'll get you a computer when it's done, and you can just sit and recover playing a computer." They're like, "Okay, I can eat this medicine if it means I get a cool computer at the end of it." So, surprise, I recovered. I didn't die, and came back to Australia and went to get a computer, and there was a Mac Classic and an Amiga at this department store, and the Amiga looked incredibly cool because it had the deluxe paints, Egyptian artwork and stuff. It's like, wow, this looks great compared to that black and white weird box thing. Amiga, let's get the Amiga. And so we got the Amiga with Arctic Fox and World Games, and that's basically to blame for all of this. Essentially, is me playing Amiga games, getting new Amiga games, eventually getting a NES, and it kind of like all kickstarted my love of games from there.
So basically doing real life Animal Crossing that almost got you killed, got you an Amiga.
Exactly. I only had to almost die to get into games.
I shouldn't laugh at that because it was so serious, but... Oh dear. Go further in then. You mentioned the NES and stuff. Like what games were you playing around that period then?
So there's basically picked up the NES. And it's a lot of those kind of standard games that like people state like when they're talking about those consoles, like Super Mario and got the Super Nintendo. We picked up F-Zero with that, which I loved a lot. Being in Australia, we didn't really get a lot of JRPGs for some reason. Or if they did, they weren't really like on shelves, and so like a lot of the same touchstones that my American friends have, like with Final Fantasy or Earthbound, or like these kind of games, we didn't really have as touchstones as much, and so like a lot of the games that we had were very much from like the the UK and European kind of 80s indie boom and things like that. So it was like a lot quirkier and a lot more. I don't want to say fun because obviously all games are fun, but like they're less serious games. And so like growing up, like a lot of the games I was playing were more lighthearted, I guess. And that basically carried like all the way through to for PlayStation games and N64 games and things like that. And basically, I realized coming out of school that I didn't want to do information technology stuff. It's like I want to make games, and maybe that's a thing I can do.
Well, lead into that then. Like, what got you first in the industry?
The first thing that got me in the industry was I went to the game developers conference in '98, which was like the completely wrong order to do all of this stuff in. But I had a friend I wanted to see in the US, and I needed an excuse to fly to the US. And at the time, it was like my mother still is a pilot, but we had like staff travel discounts, so it was like super cheap to fly from Australia to the US for me, which was incredibly awesome. But I needed an excuse, and there was this game developers conference going on in Long Beach at the time, and I was like, hey, that seems like a great thing. Like I like games, and games are things sound like you could make. Let me see what this thing is. And so I went over there, and it was kind of like this eye-opening experience of like, holy crap, there's thousands of people who make video games, and there's game design is a thing, and you can learn and be a designer, and all these people are talking about their experiences making, these crazy games like Parappa and things like that. And one of the people who were like one of the groups of people who were there were Oren Games, who was actually like super close to where I was living at the time in Brisbane. And so I came back to Australia, like reinvigorated. Like, this is it. I don't want to make databases. I'm going to make video games. Everything's going to be great. And like shotgunned my resume with absolutely no applicable skills out to everyone. And for some reason, Oren got back to me because they were looking for an assistant design position. And so I went through like, hey, I love video games. I have no demonstrable skills. What do you say? And like, nah, we kind of need someone who could make video games at this video game company. And so they turned me down, and then I spent 6 months past that point making Quake mods. I was like, okay, well, this is something I can do, and like I can grab this example and change it around a little bit, and like copy the gun so it's in the left hand and the right hand side at the same time, and like do all of these like very like early kind of modding things, and reapplied like 6 months later. It's like, hey, I'm still interested. Here is some examples of proof of work that I can make video games, and against the smarter judgment, they pulled me on, which was awesome. So that was my first. I kind of got into the industry doing design from day one, which is like unheard of usually, but completely unheard of in the '90s as well, when game design was kind of a less. I don't want to say respected, but like a less established craft as a single job. And that's kind of where I got my start, was working at Oren Games with Cam Brown, who went on to work on Mercenaries and games like that. And basically, I kind of learned the craft of design with him. From Oren, like Oren was my first job, and I was like basically thrown into the literal deep end, like learning game design. And I was working initially on a game called Corporation that was set in the distant future of 2015, and that was it was an RTS that way you would assemble robots together with, and like you'd assemble like the torso and the head and the legs of these robots, and then you'd play an RTS game with them. And that didn't really take off, and they were making another game at the time called Han Bloodline with EA, which was meant to be, at the time, it was like, this is the Warcraft 3 of RPG RTSs kind of thing, like before Warcraft 3 came out. And I don't want to say we didn't know what we were doing, but like as a studio, I think it was like a 60-person studio, which was like big at the time. And they were building a new engine from scratch in the late 90s with a custom scripting system, and we were building levels in C++, and it was just there was the ambition for it was too big, and it was essentially one of those things where it's just one of those projects that was constantly rolling and never really delivering anything. And so it was kind of good in a way, because it taught me a lot of good things about game design, like things to avoid, and it also taught me a lot of lessons for running a studio, or running like with a team of people, and like looking for warning signs of, hey, these people are unhappy, or this is a bad path to go down, or maybe like there's just a lot of things that as a 19-year-old kid you were never really taught about in school, like in terms of like dealing with working in a workplace. And so I kind of learned a lot from there for about 2 years. So I spent about 2 years there learning game design, playing a lot of Dreamcast games, actually. That's where I started playing Virtua Fighter, because Cam Brown was just an insane Virtua Fighter person. He was the kind of person, or is the kind of person who travels for 4 hours to find the test machine for Virtua Fighter, for the next Virtua Fighter like game. And so he kind of indoctrinated us into the way of VF. And basically, about 2 years in, so actually, let me rewind a little bit. So I joined at Orin in late 1998, and that's also when. So they just shipped a game called Dark Reign, which was an RTS that had the unfortunate timing to come out at the same time as Total Annihilation. So it kind of got overshadowed a little bit. But it was kind of a cool RTS. And the people who made that, while a lot of the people stayed on, a bunch of people left to found Pandemic Studios in the US. And so they went and they worked on Dark Reign 2 and Battlezone 2 for a couple of years. And the Australians that went over to the US realized they didn't really like living in LA. And they're like, we want to make games. We don't want to live in LA. We want to go back home to Australia and start up an Australian wing of Pandemic Studios. And so 2 years later, they came back and were starting the groundwork. And so their first place to hit when they were coming back was Orin, because they had all their friends there, and there's a kind of a good talent base there. So they went through and like were slowly poking at like people going, we're starting a small team, and we're looking for people. And at that time, I transitioned off Han Bloodline, and I was working on Trains with a Z at the end, which is the hardcore train simulation before train simulations became cool. And I was kind of not really enjoying, going into hardcore train research and learning the appropriate cooldown boiler time for various things. And so I was looking for something new, and I basically interviewed with this team of like these two or three people coming from Pandemic US wanting to start Pandemic Australia. And it was kind of funny because I interviewed with them, and about a week later I was like, I can't take working on a train simulator anymore. I'm just going to quit, and I'm going to go and do the typical Australian thing of touring around Europe for 2 months, and then I'll come back and I'll find a job. And so I quit and went around Europe for 2 months, and then came back and was like, oh wait, I need to see if I have a job or not. And so I followed up with the guy who interviewed me. It's like, yeah, you've got the job. Can you start in like a week or so? And it was like one of those absolute lucky things that, looking back on it, like almost 20 years later, was like almost suicidal in terms of a career. But everything kind of worked out. And so I managed to sort of rock up on day one of Pandemic Studios Australia, where we were building our computers and putting up walls and things like that. And working on our first game, which was the classic masterpiece Army Men RTS, game 19 in the Army Men franchise. But that was really cool because I got to start working with a bunch of like amazing people. Matt Harding, who you might know as, do you know the guy who's like dances around the world in YouTube videos?
I've not seen this. No, actually, no.
So. That's actually the lead designer I worked with at Pandemic Australia for like the first couple of years. So we worked on Army Men RTS together, and then we started work on a party game that got cancelled, and then at the start of Destroy All Humans, he kind of realized that he didn't want to, he didn't really want to just keep working on games. He wanted to explore the world, so he went and he kind of in a similar style, but on a way bigger scale. It's like, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to go tour the world for a little while. And I'm going to have some friends meet up with me. And while he was doing that, one of the other people that worked at Pandemic Australia, Brad Welsh, who after working at Pandemic, he worked at 343 for a bit, and I believe he's at EA now. He suggested to Matt, it's like, hey, you should, whenever you're in one of these places, you should do that really dumb lunch dance you do. Because whenever it was lunchtime, he'd almost 12:30 on the dot, he'd come into the hallway of the design pit and just do this really dumb jig, like this overly goofy kind of ridiculous thing. And so he started doing this dance on camera, and at the end of his trip, he had 30 or 40 small videos of him just dancing in the most ridiculous places around the world. And so he assembled it, and I think this was just when YouTube was starting up. He put it on YouTube, and of course it exploded into this huge dance sensation thing. He's on Good Morning America and filling ads for Visa, and it became this one of the first internet celebrity people.
I think this is slightly ringing a bell. No, it's starting to come back to me slightly.
So yeah, that's kind of. I kind of got way off track here, but yeah, he was my lead on Army Men RTS, and kind of sort of taught me a lot of stuff on design there. And that feels like my first, even though it was 4 or 5 years into my career, it was the first time I actually did shipping levels in a game, because a lot of the stuff we were doing at Oren was for prototype levels. We never really finished a level to completion there, so it was where Oren was this base of learning about what game design is. Pandemic became this place of learning how to ship a game, what shipping quality is, how systems interact, and how basically how to ship a game essentially. And so yeah, I worked there for a couple of years. Worked on Army Men RTS on a cancelled party game called Oddballs, which was incredibly cool. I'm sad that didn't come out. That was basically Mario Party, but instead of a board game, it was a timed platformer game, a third-person platformer. Which was incredibly cool. And then we spent a lot of time on Destroy All Humans, which was our original IP thing that we worked on at Pandemic Australia, it's definitely a flawed game, but I love it a lot. And that was 2 to 3 years of time. And we had a lot of weird things happen during development, but the usual game dev stories of the publisher wants us to change what the game is, and we had political turmoil in the studio and things like that. And towards the end of that, it was kind of I don't really want to work on Destroy All Humans 2 after spending 3 years of my life helping birth this baby through all of this mess. And so I started looking around, and as at the time, this was even at the peak of the Australian game dev scene, there wasn't really anywhere else to work if you wanted to work on AAA stuff. It was Irrational Games at the time was just ramping up on BioShock, but they hadn't announced it yet. But that was about it in terms of new IP AAA kind of studios. And so I started looking overseas in the US, and again, just through sheer force of luck and coincidence and timing and everything, Harmonix was looking to ramp up for Rock Band. And they were looking for a designer to come onto that team, because they were still are a very production heavy studio, because they're dealing with lots of music stuff, music outsource and production and things like that. It's very very much you need to build a huge base, deal with music companies and things like that. And so they were ramping up a new project. They needed to bring on another designer for it, and I just managed to sort of thread that needle of perfect timing for, I want to move to the US, and this is perfect timing for me, and kind of got brought on as one of the first people on the Rock Band team, which was insane. It was absolutely insane. That's my dog being incredibly loud.
I was going to say...
Hey, I know. I'm in the middle of a story. Sorry. So she's very chatty today.
So is mine for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway, sorry. You were saying...
So basically, started at Harmonix on Rock Band, working with Rob Kay, who was, I believe, ex-Argonaut, and then moved over to Harmonix to work on iToy Anti-Grav and the original Guitar Hero. He was the lead designer on that. And then, kind of had this... I kind of had this weird experience going into it because when I was interviewing, Guitar Hero had just come out. And as a studio, they weren't really sure what was next. They were working on Karaoke Revolution and all of these other music projects, but none of them had really exploded. And Guitar Hero was a very small team. It was like almost like a side project team, given how many people were on it. Because who would think that anyone would buy a plastic, $90 plastic guitar for your PS2? But it exploded. But at the time, they didn't really have a sense of how much it exploded, just because they were so close to it constantly. So I remember very clearly going through like interviews with some of like the creative directors and things like that, and they're like, well, maybe we'll probably keep working on Karaoke Revolution, and it'd be nice to make a sequel to Guitar Hero, maybe if people like it and things like that. And then that becomes this big, huge like zeitgeist explosion thing, like happening outside of them, and you kind of wanted to just go like, not understand how big this thing is, which then got flipped on me on Rock Band because we shipped Rock Band, and we're like, at the whole time we were doing Rock Band, we were like, I don't know if anyone's going to buy a $200 bundle of plastic instruments that costing the same as a console. Like it's kind of crazy. And then of course, like 5 years later, once I'm out of the blast, it was like, holy crap, this thing was actually kind of big. Even though like it's like it seemed big at the time, it was even bigger once I kind of escaped the sort of blast zone. But yeah, that was a super wild ride. That was when I joined, that was about 50, 60 people, and we peaked at about 300-ish, like 2 or 3 years later. Just like bringing on people to handle all the things you need to do when you're building, when you become like the biggest drumstick manufacturer in the world, and when you have to ship millions of plastic across the ocean, or when you're licensing thousands of songs, or like all of these crazy things. And through that point, like I was a senior on Rock Band, and I was the lead designer on Rock Band 2 and Rock Band 3. And it was kind of a similar situation to Pandemic, where I kind of didn't want to make a Rock Band 4. I was like, I've been working on this franchise for like nearly 5 years now. I'm working as a lead, and because I'm working as a lead, that basically I spend my entire time in meetings, not really making games. I kind of hit this point where I was like, I kind of want to just work on a small, like 10-person team again, which is kind of like what Pandemic was at the start. And so I saw Rock Band 3 through, and moved to Austin, Texas, to work at Twisted Pixel, who made. Before I started, they made like The Maw and Splosion Man, and a lot of these really quirky, like fun games, which reminded me, like I'd kind of forgotten at that point, but it reminded me of like how much I love like just fun, like quirky games. Like it's stuff like the Splosion Man, like they're working on like Destroy All Humans when we were making Destroy All Humans, and like even going all the way back to like stuff I was playing on the Amiga, just like making like original fun stuff that doesn't take itself too seriously. So I spent a couple of years there working on the Gunstringer, which was a Kinect game where you played a skeleton marionette puppet, which was kind of fun. Worked on some stuff that's hopefully going to announce soon, because I'm really excited for them to announce it. And then kind of like at that point, how old was I? Would have been 32, like 32, 33-ish. And I was kind of feeling that point of like, okay, what if as a designer, like I've always had this dream, like one day I can have a studio and you can make whatever games I want to make, and we'll have a team and we'll do all these great stuff. And I kind of realized like sort of just ramping up on the new project that Twisted Pixel's working on. I was like, these guys are super great, and I love working with them. But this is probably the best possible time in my entire life if I ever wanted to start a studio. So I kind of took this leap of like, it's kind of weird because it's the first time I've ever quit a job that I love. But like, I took this leap of like, I want to start a studio. I want to start a studio with Panzer, who I'd worked with at Harmonix, and I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do this another absolutely ridiculous, doomed to fail thing, that hopefully will line up, and moved to Seattle and started No Goblin, where we've been alive for like almost 3 years now, which absolutely stuns me as someone who had like minimal business experience going into all of this. But yeah, we've been around for 3 years now. We shipped roundabout almost 2 years ago now, which is kind of crazy, which was a spinning limousine game with FMV, heavily inspired by Kururin, which was a launch GBA title in Europe. And then from there, we started making 100-foot robot golf, which is exactly what the name implies, is 100-foot robots playing golf. And like a lot of our philosophy for like how we make games is basically that same goofy, fun vibe of like, we're called No Goblin. Partly it's based off something that Josh Baer, who's the chief creative guy at Twisted Pixel, would say is like whenever we'd bring up anything that was very kind of like fantasy or sci-fi or like very kind of nerdish, he'd be like, that's way too goblin-y. I don't want any goblin-y stuff in this game. And so when we were starting a studio, we spent a lot of time trying to think of a name. It's like probably the hardest part of starting a studio was coming up with a name. And we're like, what if we just called it No Goblin? Like, it's exactly the kind of games we want to make. Is like, we're probably never going to make a sci-fi first-person shooter. We're never going to make a fantasy RPG. Like, we're going to be making these these unique and fun games that have like interesting mechanics and cool story and things like that. And so basically I just stole that from Josh and based the entirety of my future career on it, which seems to be going okay so far. Knock on wood.
Threading the needle once again.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's get into your favourite game, World Games. You'd got it with your Amiga, but don't suppose by any chance after you got your Amiga that you'd played winter or summer games? Because like they're very traditional like sports collection games, whereas World Games is not.
Yeah, it's a lot of it was like when I was coming up with like when you gave me the incredibly cruel and mean task of picking one favorite game. I was like, do the California games, because obviously California games is like the pinnacle of that sort of epic style game collection. And like I played winter games, summer games, like a lot of those games. And I think World Games won out for me. Partially it's because it was in those like that first collection of games that brought me into games. But another part of it is I think it's kind of slightly goofier in a way than like California games. Like I like going through like some of the stuff in there. Like it's more funny to fail in World Games than I think it is to fail in California games. Like if you're doing the cliff diving and you knock your head on this cliff and like flail down while a pelican is just like looking at you like you're an idiot. Like I feel like that's what a lot of World Games. I think that's a lot of why World Games has a special place in my heart. In that there are bigger ways to fail, and all of them are hilarious.
For some reason, like when you say that story, all I can think back to is the London Olympics 4 years ago when that guy went off the diving board in the diving contest and he just nearly knocked his head off.
Yeah. And we're laughing about this guy who nearly got like a traumatic brain injury, but it's just like this comical, like it's just something like just slapstick funny about it.
To be crystal clear for anyone who hasn't seen it, he didn't actually bang his head, but he was like inches away from doing it.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But I feel like that's a lot of like the world games thing, like, you know, crashing through the barrels when you're doing the speed skating, or like doing the caper toss and having it land on your feet, and it's just like you hopping for a couple of seconds. Like it's all of those like small touches that just like really make that game for me. On top of the kind of Epic's games formula of here are these really just distilled fun game experiences that you're playing with people in like a friendly co-op but also competitive way.
So drop the elevator pitch then for World Games. If you were wanting me to play World Games today, even though it's more or less basically impossible at this point, like how would you go about it?
The World Games is the goofiest co-op knockoff Olympics game that you can play.
That was my first thought when I saw what World Game was.
It's that we don't have the rights to the Olympics, and we want to go goofier than the Olympics. So we're going to go and take what we think is the important sport in each country, and you will play that and be the best in this thing. And it's goofy couch play fun, even though you're probably at the time you were playing it hunched over a computer in a den somewhere.
So yeah, like the fact it has it does have one or two traditional sports in there. Like it has weightlifting, which you'd find in the Summer Olympics, or slalom skiing, like you'd see in the Winter Olympics. But beyond that, like it's just batshit weird. Put it like that.
It's like the caber toss, the log rolling. Like it's all stuff. It's one of it was really hard to pick this, by the way, because like my usual. We can talk about like some of the other games later, but like the usual sort of designer, like breaking the ice in an interview thing is like, tell me your top 5 favorite games. And so because of that, I kind of have this internalized list of like my top three are Super Mario World and GTA, and I have like these. I had Midwinter 2 on the list for a while, and then I started thinking about my games for this, and like Midwinter 2 is impossible to play. GTA 3 is, I don't really want to go back and play that. Super Mario World I'll go back and play, but it's like a very dry example to give, which is a weird thing to say. But like the more I thought about it, it's like World Games, I would go back and play World Games. Like if you wanted to play World Games right now and like you were not across an ocean, I would be like, yes, this is a thing I will happily play with you for half an hour. As a game, and it's just one of those things that like looking back on it, it's like it just impacted how I enjoy games and how I make games so much in terms of goofiness, in terms of polish, like all of those things. It's a serious, like it's internally serious, but it's not a serious game. Like this is like the pinnacle, like the fake Olympics of video games. And this is like the highest honor these people are doing. And this guy knocks his head on a cliff and like jams his head in the sand as he falls down. And it's that's pretty much my aesthetic.
So basically, World Games is basically the reason why No Goblins games are so goofy and weird.
Pretty much, yeah. It's all Epic's fault. And I feel like maybe Epic as a company is kind of like to blame for that in general.
So yeah, I'm going to run down each sport from the game, and you're going to tell me how you found each of them, how you got on with each of them. So let's start with Mother Russia, weightlifting.
Weightlifting, man, my memories of that are basically loading up as many weights as possible on the thing. Like part of this game is like you stop taking it seriously after a while. Like, okay, I'm just going to make this poor guy suffer. So you just load up the weights. And it's just like, you can almost see like the pity on his face before he lifts. And Uh, and you go through. I wish I could remember the joystick motion for it, but like you go through and you do a like clean jerk move on it, and if you pulled it off, you basically sort of were the leader for that round essentially. Uh, but yeah, all of my memories are just being really cruel to this guy and just like jamming on weight upon weight because you'd kind of scroll them and they'd pop on as they would go off the center weight. And so it was kind of like this mean slider you were dialing up when you were about to play.
Just attempting to break his back out of pure spite.
Yeah, exactly.
Next, we go to La France. Slalom skiing.
Slalom scheme I feel like was one of the weaker ones. And maybe it's just because it wasn't there wasn't like prime like goof opportunity there. But it was a from what I remember of it, it was just a solid slalom game. And it was maybe tuned a little hard. Like I had a little trouble like getting through as a 5-year-old kid, but part of that may have been because I was a 5-year-old kid. But yeah, I feel like that's if I had to pick a wiki point, I think it's probably either that or sumo. Of like these are the ones you'll play and you'll enjoy, but like it's not when I say world games, like that's not the thing I'm going to be putting up as my flag banner.
What about in Canada, which we should mention by the way that these countries are the ones holding their kind of national sports, so that's kind of why I'm referencing them. Dan mentioned as well. So yeah, log rolling.
Log rolling is awesome. I believe that was co-op, right? It was 2 players. Yeah. I could be completely wrong. It may have just been AI, but I remember it being like 2 people rolling on the log at the same time, and it was like one of the few adversarial. It was like this very adversarial thing of like who's gonna roll which way to like knock off the other person. It was like kind of like almost like a jousting style, like you're trying to compensate for the other person and knock them off. I remember being like one of those things like one of those games you would bring over, and if you really wanted to win against someone, you'd play it against someone who'd never played the game before, because like it takes a while to get into that rhythm of how that game works. And so there was like you had your friends over who were like coming for a sleepover and like, okay, this is my freebie round that I'm going to use to just knock you off and get an extra point on the board.
Like how long does it take you to kind of get that rhythm?
It took a while. I think it would have been like you can be competitive within a couple of games, like yeah, like once you get a sense of it. But like it's one of those things that like it's like rock paper scissors in the sense like once you get into the mind of the other person of how they're going to roll. It's a lot more interesting.
It's interesting when you mention rock paper scissors, because it just when you put it like that, it just makes me think maybe this is just down to sheer luck.
No, it's pure skill. Everything it's the Mario Party thing. Everything is skill. There is no luck involved.
Next, we come to cliff diving.
Cliff diving. That's right up there. Like that and caber toss. And the barrel jump. If I had to pick a top 3, it's those 3. Like it's one of those. I think this is the opposite in that it's really easy to get into it, and it's really easy to figure out how it plays. And you can choose cliff height as well. So like if you're new, you can go lower and try and get a safer jump. But just getting the perfect entry into that is way harder than it looks because you don't really get that much push off from the cliff when you jump. Which is also great because like every reaction to everything going wrong is hilarious, and it's he's knocking his head on a cliff and you're just watching him just fall like into the water, and then this pelican is just like covering its eyes at your terrible jump, or if you go like straight down, you can get your head stuck in the sand for a while. I think this one is like it's a very fine tuned like game. But all the polish on the outside of it is what makes it like pushes it up another level.
Caber toss,
I suck at, and I wish I didn't suck at. Like we're talking about like the log roll and like how you eventually get into that. I don't know what it is because I've played with other people who get it, and like I never could get into a rhythm for caber toss, which is fine though because just like. Part of the humor for that is like you've gone through and like you're going through and you're playing and you're doing great at like barrel jumping and cliff diving and things like that, and then you come to caber toss and it's like this triumphant like sort of Scottish jig thing, and you go through like this big build up. You're going to go and throw this log really high, and you take one step, and it just falls and lands on your foot, and you're just like standing there hopping with this huge crowd just disappointed behind you. So it made up for it in laughter than it did in actual like me winning games of world games.
This is a bit of a weird one, I have to say, but it's fun and interesting all the same. Bull riding.
Bull riding, man. I barely remember bull riding. That's weird. I know there were different versions of world games. I know they varied based on platform. I wish I had a list of where they varied. Yeah, I had completely forgotten about bull riding until you mentioned it, actually, which is probably not the best thing to say about my favorite game. But, I'm sure it was great. Yeah, I wish I had that list of like how I know California Games was one of those ones where it was hugely different per platform. Like they would have like hacky sack on the Lynx and roller skating on the Master System. I want to say like there was like a bunch of different ones like that. So that it may be failing my memory because it wasn't on the Amiga version, or it was on the Amiga version, and I just have a terrible memory.
Fair enough. Barrel jumping then.
This is my pro. If they make an esport out of barrel jumping, I'm a millionaire. Like I am. It's one of those ones where it's totally a like a hubris kind of thing as well, because you have no limit on the amount of barrels you want to jump. It's basically, it presents you with, I believe, 3 barrels at the start, and you basically move the stick, kind of like the weightlifting style. Like I'm going to be able to jump over 20 barrels this time, and you go through and you like the usual pattern you'd see is you see the 3 barrels, maybe knock it up 1 or 2. They go through and they do the left-right timing to speed up the skating. They do the jump, and they just clear it by miles. And they're like, okay, clearly I'm the best at this game. And so they ratchet up the barrels like 24 barrels, and they go through. And for some reason, like the amount of times I've seen this is kind of uncanny. For some reason, they just flub up either the run-up or the jump, and they jump like maybe 2 barrels worth, and they just collapse down, and it's just these like pixel art barrels just collapsing as this guy just like jumps straight into them, and it's just there's something just really, really satisfying. Like the clearing the barrels is cool, but seeing your competitors just fail miserably on like after like sort of getting their hopes up is really nice. And this whole interview is making me feel like I'm a really mean person.
The way you're putting it to me right now, I really do want to try and find a version of World Games I can play.
Yeah, I mean, they should be like. I feel like the Amiga stuff should be abandoned web by now. Like it's basically finding the right emulator for all of this stuff.
I'm just going to see if I can search for this. Oh no, I have the Wikipedia page open here. Oh no, it's on the Virtual Console on the Wii.
Oh, excellent! That's probably the NES version though. I'm not sure what they. I don't think I've ever played the NES version of World Games.
Well,
I wonder if that's where bull riding is. But yeah, it's been one of those things where like as a design thing, like you love making new IPs and stuff, but like every year or so, I'm like, man, I wonder who owns all of the Epic's IP right now. And like I go through the thing, it's like some medical company bought something at some point and sold it to a religious company, and it went through this weird path. And like I'm fine not chasing down this IP path for a thing I absolutely cannot afford. I'll make a game about robots or something.
Apparently, System 3 bought the assets for Epics for stuff like California Games and Mission Impossible, or Impossible Mission for DS, PSP, and Wii. So maybe you might get luck.
May give them a call after this is done. See if they want to sell it to me for like $20-$30. My budget is very tight right now when we're full production on Robot Golf, so my spare spending money is a little tight. But I'm sure they'll come to deal.
Here's hoping. Finally then, a bit more traditional, but still I'd have placed all the same. Sumo wrestling.
Yeah, sumo. I remember being. It was kind of like that the slalom thing of like it's a good mode and it's like it's a good game to play. But for me, a lot of the reason I love world games is the goofiness of it, and so like the fact that it's a serious. Well, I don't want to say serious, but like the fact that it's more focused on just sumo wrestling. Kind of it doesn't get into my top games of world games for me, but it's still like I say that as like it's a terrible thing. Like I remember like it being fun. Like it was like all of these games like it's like the co-op design rules basically. Once it goes co-op, it becomes like magically fun because you have that interaction between people, and like all of these games going through and having like everyone have their weaknesses and like the games they liked and they didn't like. Really is what made the whole of world games so special. Was that it was everyone had their pros and cons, and everyone was bringing, everyone had the ability to win at this game, even if they were new or old or like had tons of time learning how to caber toss or not. Like it was this weird leveling play field, and even if everyone failed miserably, people were still having fun and laughing.
It's that kind of special joy it brought with the co-op.
Yeah, exactly. And like I'm sure, like I've played it single player, like it's still a fun single player game, but it's that extra layer of just turn-based gameplay and like having that tension ramp up as you're passing around the joystick. That was something special.
And like one or two things that I've read on the game is that some of the sports were very notoriously difficult and sometimes.
Yeah, caber toss.
Good point.
Like as one of those things where like if I hadn't seen other people click with it and nail it, I would be like, yeah, some of these games are just way too hard, like way too tightly balanced and just impossible. But then I'd go over to like a friend's place and they would just nail it. And I think it's just one of those things where it's like all of those activities, at least one or two just won't click for people. Or not won't click, but like they won't have an affinity for it. Whereas other games will like totally nail in, and it's like this weird secret. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but like there's just this mechanical ability balance in it that's just naturally means that you're going to find one game that you're able to really just succeed at. But yeah, if I hadn't played with friends like growing up with it and like seen like one person just like absolutely take to a specific game, I'd be like, yeah, caber toss is absolutely broken. It's a mess. I've never thrown a long caber toss. They clearly should remove the game, but yeah, unfortunately, evidence proves to the contrary.
I was going to say, is there any sport in the game you'd fancy your chances at in real life? Like you mentioned, like I know you mentioned barrel jumping as a kind of rule. But what if you did that in actual real life, not as an esport?
Out of all of the games, I've never been skiing, so that takes out skiing. I'm a little overweight, but I'd have to wear a fat suit for sumo wrestling, so that's out.
Not weightlifting and ours.
Yeah. I think it may actually be barrel jumping the more I think about it. Like, I can ice skate. I'm not going to be jumping off a rocky cliff anytime soon. I definitely don't have the upper body strength for a caber toss. I'm not going bull riding anytime soon. Yeah, I'd say probably like if I had a bit of time to practice, like if I could get my ice skating skills to, I don't need to spend the first 20 minutes on ice rink holding onto the side. Like past that point, if I could hit the ice and like be speed skating and learn how to jump on ice, I think that's my ticket to real life sporting fame. Like I think that's it. When that goes into the Olympics, then I am absolutely set.
Representing Australia or the US then?
Probably Australia. I'm still an Australian citizen, even though I'm living in Seattle. So I'll be like the second Australian winter medal.
So post World Games, and like, is there any sports collection games like since then that you think has lived up to the ethos of World Games? I
think like obviously there's California games, summer games, winter games, like all of the other Epic's games that aren't California games too. I think they have that ethos. Like, it's not as goofy, obviously, but it still has that same gameplay feel. Like the closest, like the original N64 Mario parties have kind of that sense as well, or that's a little more random. I think it's one of the things I feel like has been lost over the last, say, decade, like since the 360 onwards, is that sort of couch party play fun experience. And like there are games that are doing this, like, you know, Nidhogg, Duck Game. Like there are, if I want to hook up a PC to my TV, there are games that I can play that kind of capture like one game from that experience, but nothing that was us rotating through games that had specific, you know, that each of us had specific affinity for. So yeah, I don't know if there actually has been something that really captures what the game series was about.
Well, that's a shame.
So yeah, no Goblin Game 3, California Games 3, confirmed.
So what else do you like about World Games that we've not touched upon yet?
I think we're talking about this before. Is like, it's kind of one of those games where I feel really mean for picking it because it's not like this, you know, deep discussion of system mechanics intertwining with this deep, complex, meaningful story. Like, it's a goofy game, and it's like a lot of the fun is out of like the polish layer they put on it and things like that. I think if I had to mention one thing we haven't mentioned about it yet, I believe the Amiga version was sponsored by Continental Airlines before they were bought up by whoever they were bought up by, United, I think. I don't know. It was all so long ago. But like, I loved how, like, looking back on it, I loved how cheesy the product placement was back then. And like California Games had this too. Like they had Ocean Pacific and like all these surf brands in there as well. And as a kid, and like I didn't even really think about this until like I was, you know, deep in kind of the AAA brand integration sort of hell that we had to be in for doing sponsorship and things like that in games. But it's like they probably got sponsorship deals for all of that stuff. And so like there's at some point in the mid 80s, there's some poor Epix employee chatting to a bunch of people in suits at Continental Airlines going, "We want you to be the sponsor of this game where you jump off a cliff and get your head stuck in the sand and Pelican covers its eyes. And also there's a Cavitas game that you'll hurt your foot on. Please give us $50,000. And it's just like the idea of thinking through just thinking through like how ridiculous like those brand meetings must have gone is kind of amazing. I wish there was a behind the scenes making of like that era of Epix, just for my own personal edification.
This is it now. You can do this with 100-foot robot golf. Just get all the product placement in the world now. Just go for it. Go for broke.
That's true. I should. There's something really that so I can like sit down with like Mountain Dew or someone and be like, hey, look at these robots destroying buildings. I think this is perfectly great brand for your drink.
Or Doritos.
Yes, well, they had Doritos Crash Course, and I don't feel like it's possible to top Doritos Crash Course in terms of advert games. Unless the Burger King games, those are pretty good.
True, I'd forgotten about those. What didn't you like about World Games?
I think it's just like the slalom and sumo, and I guess bull riding if that was in the Amiga version. But it was kind of like this low point, not low point, but it's like it was kind of, it didn't for me match the peaks of everything else. And so I feel like that's kind of the low point, and probably like if I like it, this is all like sort of nitpicking kind of stuff, but like, you know, the session times could get a little longer if you had like 6 people changing around the controller to play a game. And so you get like 45 minutes in, and like a bunch of people would be bored, but they were terrible people, and I'm not friends with them, so I guess that's fine. But yeah, it's one of those games like it is still playable. 30 years on? Oh my god! It's still playable now, which is good, but it's like on the borderline of still playable. Like it's not like Midwinter 2, which is completely impossible to play even through an emulator now.
If there's anything you would change from a design perspective from the game, what would it be? What would you do?
Oh boy. I would. I mean, this bringing up slalom and sumo up to like a higher goof possibility. I feel like one of the things, and like obviously I was in the '80s, so like there wasn't like this kind of touchstone to pull from. But like one thing I really like putting into games now is like that GoldenEye reward system at the end, where it would give you two like kind of badges of honor. It's like least violent or like most slappers or whatever the like there's like these like merit awards that it would give you, and it's kind of a soft spot for me, and like I've been putting them in games for a while now. Like they're in Rock Band at the end when you finish. We've got them in 100-foot robot golf as well. But if I could go back in time and like take one piece of like modern design wisdom back with me, it'd be like, hey, these guys at Rare, you're going to get them to port a game soon, but don't worry about that. Like take this really cool thing and just like give you like most rotations after a cliff hit, or like highest barrel jump, or like this like just some like really cool like sort of merit awards that you can kind of goof around with your friends with afterwards.
So, how would you rank Epic's sports games in a top three? Obviously, World Games at the top, but how would you go from there?
World Games at the top. Depending on the port, California games. I would have to go back and look at all the different California games as ones, but obviously the Lynx version I remember being really good. The Amiga version I remember being good. Then it's between summer and winter. I feel like I'd have to give winter the edge, and I don't really have a good basis for why, which it always makes for good reasoning when making a list. But I feel like I I can think about more of the things that were in winter games more than I can for summer games. Like summer games, maybe felt a little too close to track and field. But I think it would be very close, but I would put winter games on top. And then summer games, and then California games too. Just like skip a blank space and then put California games 2 underneath that blank space.
Honorable mentions. Ahead of time, you gave me a few of these, so we'll go into these in detail. So let's start with a game that you were actually kind of debating whether to go with World Games or this. Kerbal Space Program.
That's true. Kerbal Space Program. So like I was mentioning before, like I had my top 5 games, and I was thinking back on it. And I haven't really updated this list in probably like 4 years in my head, because I haven't had to interview anyone or be interviewed in like 4 years, like in terms of like applying for a job or things like that. And then I'm looking back on it, and Kerbal is something that I have been playing for at least 4 years now, like relatively regularly. I like a couple 100 hours in my Steam rotation, which is high for me. I'm not like a huge like time investment in game stuff, just because I play a lot of games, but like in terms of like one game, like I only have so much time when I'm not making games that I have to play games, and there's so many games coming out I want to play that it's usually I'll finish a game and shelve it, or like I'll come back now and then if it's like a fun party game. But yeah, I keep coming back to Kerbal relatively constantly, and I think part of it is just the joy of just like building rockets and just like shooting them off into space, and like building these, like slowly like tuning and iterating these vehicles, which I guess makes sense because like that's a lot of what game development, game design is iterating and trying to like get to a point. But that coupled with the space side of things, because I love space. I come from an aviation family, and and so kind of merging those two together and having it constantly update every couple of months with like new features and new ways to build rockets, but new reasons to build different rockets. Like they introduced a career system, so instead of just trying to get a rocket to the moon, you're now trying to like shuttle people into orbit for money and things like that. And there's just something that keeps pulling me back into it. And it was tough like for World Games because Kerbal very nearly beat it. Like it was some serious discussion on my end in my brain about like what like is there enough in Kerbal to push it over World Games? And I think like there's a little bit of goofiness in there, like that sort of serious, but like things kind of escalate. But I feel like in terms of impact onto how I am as a person and the kinds of games I build, I feel like World Games had a bit more impact, especially in terms of like starting a company that makes these kind of games. But yeah, like I still play Kerbal. Like I'm still following through it. So they released a new the 1.1 update that has like all kind of performance improvements and things like that. But there's something really nice about making something and then flying it and like achieving a goal and like doing cool space stuff.
Next, Super Mario World.
Yeah, Super Mario World is kind of Super Mario World. I think may be close to a perfectly designed game, and like in terms of like design mentors, obviously Miyamoto's like a huge one for a ton of designers, and me included. I just feel like there's so much that when you start looking at it from a design perspective and you start pulling back the layers and like seeing like how these things are perfectly paced, or like it's the first instance of Miyamoto help in a game where you'd go and you'd hit a block and it would pop up a text thing, which seems like it's a little antiquated now, but at the time it's like, oh, of course, like you would tell people what they need to do if it was complex at the point where they need to do it, and which is it sounds so dumb when you say it in 2016, but like in 93 or whatever, it's like, oh, that's really smart. And I feel like there's a lot of stuff with how the exclamation color blocks unlock and like how those reveal different paths and different routes, and all of the platforming is just super super tight and honed. It's one of those games that is just, it's like a meal, a design meal that you can just like sit down and go through and just go, it's like watching the back like innards of a watch rotating essentially, and it's just an amazing thing to like pull apart as a designer. And like it's a game I can still play now, but like unlike World Games or unlike Kerbal, for me, like I don't really have a desire to go through and complete Super Mario World again. Like I've done that many times, and like I'll happily pick it up and play it for a little bit. But I've played it so many times, and also on so many platforms now that it's been like in Virtual Console and things like that. I've kind of exhausted the entire, like I've eaten the meal essentially, but it's still like for me it's just like one of those just amazingly constructed works that I think is it's probably one of the best design games I've played. Have
you tried playing it in Mario Maker yet at all?
I've messed around in Mario Maker a little bit. I'm a little sad actually that it's still the same mechanics, like still the same tuning and mechanics across the levels. Like I kind of wish there was like some of the unique tuning that was in each game. Like obviously I can understand why not, given how quickly you can change themes and things like that. Mario Maker is one of those games I wish I'd played 20 years ago before I started making games, because the last thing I want to do after making games for 10 hours or whatever is sit down and then make a level, because there's like this guilt that overtakes me of like, I'm making a level in Mario Maker, or I could be using this time to make another hole or another level, or like doing the exact same thing but on this project that supports my rent and my ability to eat. And it's hard to detach that sometimes in Mario Maker, but I've played that a ton, and it's really really cool. And like some of the stuff that's come out of that, like the giant bomb, like Dan versus Patrick style
I,
challenges
I
that are
was,
going
I,
on.
yeah, I was just gonna say I was actually watching the PAX East panel they did last night, and oh, the hilarity in it sometimes it's just brilliant. I love how that game is just kind of brought out so much fun. Not it's
I
just
think that's the thing, right? It's simplified down what used to be like an arduous thing and just presented it in this easy, like, here, go nuts, make a really great level. And it's amazing and frustrating on both ends, because it's amazing because you'll see people who haven't thought about level design before, like, make something very quick and be like, oh wow, I can make a thing that's great. And then they go and make something that they actually want to be polished and go, wow, this is really a lot harder than I thought it would be for something that's basically just drawing blocks. And you're like, yes, I told you so. See, I have a valid skill. And then on the other hand, it's also super frustrating, like knowing how, like, the barriers to entry that they had making those original games, and they're like sketching out on graph paper levels, and the iteration time was measured in days rather than seconds. And like knowing, like, I it must be super weird seeing people make something in seconds that took you like months to build originally, when everything was still in progress. So I think it's wonderful. I think it's a really great thing, especially if for people who who don't have access or don't have this, like, the previous knowledge to like build levels in like proper, like, full engines. I think it's super great.
Next, let's jump into Midwinter 2.
Midwinter 2 was an amazing Amiga game where it's basically a first-person open-world sandbox with like conversation and a meta game of like regions of countries fighting against each other, and you could fly and drive and go underwater in these polygonal submarines. But it came out in 1992 on the Amiga, which makes no sense when you think about, like, there's like if you released a game like that, if you like pushed up your Steam game of like, you can travel underwater and fly in the air, and there's this crazy campaign that you're going through, and you can create a character that's able to flirt out of prisons and do all of this other stuff. Like, you're like, wow, that's super ambitious. That's super crazy. Like, but like in 92, it seemed like a miracle at the time. Like, you could literally exist in this world, and you didn't have to just follow a straight level path. Like, the decisions you made on like which islands you wanted to conquer impacted how the AI would take over other islands, because it was I can't say the word with lots of islands because I'm a 36-year-old man. The A word of lots of islands, which I will move on from now because I'm a professional game designer. There's something magical about this being a realized world, and it's rough talking about it because it's unplayable now. Like, you go through and you play it. Like, I mean, you can boot up a disc and it looks like it did before, but the fog plane is like 20 meters in. It runs at 4 frames a second. Its controls are terrible. Like, it is not aged in a way that is accessible to anyone who wants to check it out. And it's a real shame, because it's one of those things that, like, I didn't realize it at the time, but it kind of instilled it instilled a love of sandbox games and a love of system mechanics that I built on as a designer. And like, I love playing sandbox games, and I love emergent gameplay and like all of those, you know, touchy-feely designer things. But it's sad that it's unplayable now, because I feel like that's like the first foundation of those types of games.
Speaking of sandbox games, next up is a game that I would perhaps hold in my own top 20 games of all time. Perhaps the one that really launched sandbox games into a whole new era. Like, it revolutionized it. It's Grand Theft Auto 3.
Yes. And that's the amazing game. Like, that's like, it's almost one of the things. It's like Grand Theft Auto 3. I don't need to explain why this game is absolutely bonkers revolutionary. It has a special place in my heart. But I think a lot of it was like the the best memory I have of it, there's kind of two memories. One is playing actually GTA 1, and there's a mission in there very early on where you have to deliver cash to someone. And at the end of that mission, you can just kill the guy and keep the money, and it says mission success. Like no prompted, no like you should do this. Like if you decide to keep the money and not give it to this guy, that's completely valid. And that was one of those moments like, wow, that's insane. This is a big open world again. And so going into GTA 3, like I remember there not being a huge amount of hype going into it, and I was like, holy crap, this is going to be a 3D version of that. That's amazing. And like there wasn't really that much buzz at the time for some reason. But, like maybe it was just in Australia at the time, there wasn't that much buzz for it. But I remember very clearly we were working on Army Men RTS at the time it came out in Australia, and I went out at lunch and picked up a copy of the pre-censored, like pre-GTA style cover on it version of it. I picked it up and we put it in our test kit to play, because it's like the only test kit that you could actually play a retail game on. And we just lost like 4 hours. Like the entire afternoon was just the entire dev team just around this small like 14-inch TV. As we would go through and like get in the car and ratchet up the wanted rating, and everything would explode and like things would happen. And like we didn't start a single mission, but just like playing in that world was just so enthralling and just like so hilarious, watching people just fail as these tanks and like this impossible force of might comes towards. And it was like just a super crystal clear memory in my mind of like that, and of course the impact like playing through the story and like all of the things that introduced to like basically build a genre on top of that is amazing. And I'm like, again, it's like one of those ones where like maybe this is my top game, but I wouldn't go back and play. I don't really have a desire to go back and play GTA 3. Like maybe Vice City, every couple of years, but I feel like I've exhausted the full. I've eaten that game essentially.
Well, you've just kind of burnt yourself out on it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, like I can see where you're coming from, but at the same time, I think that'd be a bit of a shame, because like even now, GTA 3 is just so influential, and I realise that's kind of a bit of a cop-out way of saying it, but it really is just so influential. And even though there are games in the series alone that have surpassed 3 in terms of scale and style and all that there, like Vice City, like San Andreas, like 4 or 5. Every once in a while, if I can find a system that can play Grand Theft Auto for you, whether it be PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, like it's out now on PlayStation 4, and I don't know why I've already bought it already, but like I could still, drive around the island of Portland and just lose myself and just listen to Laszlo and Chatterbox and the ninja guy just
Hey ya! Oh, Laszlo, I think I hurt my hand. My pinky's all bent the wrong way.
Listen, Karate Kid, the desk is still in one piece. Thanks for coming on the show.
I could talk about that.
No, I totally feel you. Like I feel like that's kind of it though. It becomes a nostalgia trip rather than rather than an active engagement enjoyment. Well, I mean, you're still enjoying it. That's a bad way to say it, but like it's like the reasons I would go back into GTA 3 right now would be nostalgia. Like, oh, I want to see the remaster of this and see how great it looks at 1080p or whatever. Or I want to try and fly a dodo again. But like, I feel like even with Vice City, like maybe this is me realizing that Vice City goes above GTA 3 in my list. But like, I'd probably play through Vice City again before I'd play through GTA 3 again. And I feel like that's just because of it has a more interesting story to me, and like there's more. Like the having helicopters in there made things way more interesting, and there were a bunch of other things in there. But I feel like the main reason for me going back into those is just remembering how great those games were. Whereas with world games, like I would legitimately go and play a game of world games right now, not for nostalgia, but for actual fun. And I feel really bad saying that because I love GTA 3 so much, and it's been in my top 5 for a long time. But yeah, This is why this whole thing is just super mean, because now I'm having to talk bad things about GTA 3. You made me do.
Yeah, thank you. I'm quite the manipulator, so to speak. But no, I totally get what you mean, and like, here's the thing I find fascinating about Grand Theft Auto, at least for me. Like, I'm not just talking specific games here. I mean, like, as a series as a whole, at least from GTA 3 onwards, because I've not played 1, 2, or London. But like, even the lowest ranking game in terms of my favorite GTA games, which would be San Andreas, like, my least favorite GTA game is still a really good game in its own right. It's just kind of taste of preference, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd probably be on the same as well. I'd say that I would put 1969 above San Andreas for sure, which sounds weird, but that's my own personal taste as well. But yeah, it's a weird thought exercise to sit down and have to rank everything.
It's that kind of influence that GTA has, that even you can go in to a series and find a game that, for the lack of a better term, just suits you best in terms of style, in terms of the world, in terms of the story it's trying to tell you. I think that's kind of what makes GTA so unique. And that it's not just it telling you its own story. You can go in and make your own story in a way, to an extent. Anyways, that's just kind of grown and gotten bigger with each installment up into and now GTA 5. So
yeah, I mean, I think the player story stuff is almost better than the actual story stuff for me as well. Like, there's I'm not sure if you've seen it. There's a series on Kotaku called Highlight Reel, and they've been like, ever since GTA 5 has come out, like, nearly every episode there's a clip from GTA 5 in there of someone just doing something really ridiculous and fun. And it's like, even 2-3 years in, there's still like really, really great, interesting stories coming out of that, which is amazing.
Is there any more honorable mentions you want for one?
I think those are the big ones. Like, I'm thinking through the stuff I used to say in that top 5 list. Link to the Past was on there for a while, but that kind of fell off early. Not because I didn't like it, but because I realized I love Zelda games, but I realized I don't love like crazy playthrough Zelda games like most people. I actually hadn't seen through the entirety of Twilight Princess until the HD version came out, and I watched Panzer play through that, and that was one of those games that I kind of wish I'd sort of battled through those first super bland 2 or 3 hours to go to the rest of the game, because it's kind of crazy how great like the rest of Twilight Princess is, but it's just blockaded off by this super laborious herd the sheep or whatever kind of stuff. But yeah, I think Link to the Past for a while. F-Zero obviously I love F-Zero, and like I play racing games, but I'm not a good racing game person. Like I wouldn't be able to. Like I own Forza, for example, but I play with like most of the assists on. Whereas F-Zero, I felt there's something about how the SNES version and even the N64 version are balanced that makes it super accessible, but also still maintains a skill curve to learn and get better about. And the other reason, like one of the reasons I had it on my top 5 for a while is I was super into it in Australia, and we had the PAL version in Australia, and then we had an American exchange student come who completely trashed all my times. And I literally a decade of like, it was the first like weeks of like trying to get my Mute City time down from like 49 down to like 36 or whatever he'd showed me. And I spent so much time on that, and I'm pretty sure I nailed the perfect line for that multiple times. And it wasn't until I got into game dev and realized the 50 hertz, 60 hertz difference between NTSC and PAL that I realized that he was playing on the NTSC version and his version was faster, and that if we'd played on the same console, I would have absolutely demolished him. And it's like, I don't have many life regrets, but if I could go back in time and just play hardware to hardware with this guy, I could have been such a success in junior school. Yeah, F-Zero has a special place in my heart as well.
Top 3 games ever, what would they be? Obviously, World Games at the top. How would you rank the rest of the top 3?
Top 3. Yeah, World Games at the top. And then I'd put Kerbal in there. and then the third slot would have to be... I was originally going to say GTA 3, but I think the more I talk about this out loud, I probably would put Vice City in that slot if I didn't put in Super Mario World. I would have to fight it out between Vice City and Super Mario World for the third slot.
That'd be an interesting way to fit that.
Yeah, that's like I'm trying to see if I can just like not do a cop out and like try and figure out what the third slot would be, but like I feel like those are maybe Vice City gets the edge.
Ooh.
And I feel really, really bad saying that about one of the most definitive design-driven games of all time. But so is Vice City, and I would still go back and play Vice City more than I would go back and play Super Mario World, even though it's such a great game.
Fair enough.
Oh, this is so mean.
That's me.
No Goblin.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the start of
100-foot robot goal!
Foot robot golf. Can I play 100-foot robot golf now? Can you let me play it now, please?
Well, it's actually showing at Indicate East at the moment. So, like, if you can fly over in the next 18 hours, you could probably jump on.
But I want to play it now. Just a second. I can't, fly over. I want to play it now. No, Dan, let me play it now. Let me play it now.
You have no idea how happy I would be if the game was done right now and I could just get it out to everyone and see.
You just send me a build right now. Just like I'm fine with that.
That's actually one of the things that's been a little tricky for us. Is so we're shipping 100-foot robot golf on PlayStation 4 first, and it's weird being in a situation where we can't actually give builds to people. Because like it's not like a Steam thing where we can just like push off a build and like, hey, everyone's got a PC. It's like, have you got a PS4 dev kit flashed to this specific revision? Because when we can give you a package then. But yeah, it's kind of like this. It's like step back into like the old like AAA kind of reviewer thing of like which reviewers have test kits and which reviewers don't, and which ones do we have to wait for the master. And so it's been one of those things where we've been kind of leaning more on pulling people in and seeing how people react at conventions than sending builds out, which I like a lot better because I can actually see how people react. But at the same time, like that whole like playtesting and like seeing people play thing is, even with a game like, especially with a game like 100-foot robot golf, where we'll sit 4 people down to play, and I'll watch them have an amazing time, and I'll be frustrated because they haven't pulled up anything like super vitally broken, and I'm like, this is infuriating. I need you not to have a good time so I can fix the things that I know have to be broken in here somewhere. But yeah, it's a fun game. You should play it sometime.
I want to play it now, but tell me this: are all the pilots in the game corgis? I want all the pilots in the game to be corgis.
I am sorry, but we have humans as well as corgis in our pilot roster.
All right, you've lost me on just whatever.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You can just play the corgi robot. We actually got the concept in for that pretty recently, and it's really, really cool. I cannot wait to share that concept because we've had a long time like trying to figure out like cool robot concepts, and we showed off Varney, which is like we call it the Beyonce of robot golf. And she's like got this gold robot with like this fake YSL leather pattern across her shoulders and this eagle on the shoulder, and like this super regal like expensive robot. And we have some Evangelion inspired like bioengineered robots that have been grown for the express purpose of playing golf. And we have some like Jaegers and things like that. And we're like, we have this dog. We've promised a dog from the trailer. We have to do a dog, which we're fine with. But it was like, how do we do a dog robot when we only have like bipedal rigging and animations and skeleton? Because we're only 2 people making this game, so we don't have a full-time animator to like build a 4-legged rig and animate separate stuff and things like that. So it's like, how do we build a robot for this that isn't a huge cop out? And so we were going back and forth on this for a while, and just recently we basically gave this problem to this guy called Lysol Jones, who is an absolutely amazing concept artist. He's been doing all of our robot concepts, and he sent us this robot, which I'm not going to spoil, but it's so cool that I'm pretty sure you'll see it soon. But it's just like the most amazing solution to how you get like dogs in a pilot suit to pilot a robot, and it's I hate being that person who's like, well, man, wait till you see this thing I can't talk about, but man, it is really cool.
God damn it, stop teasing me like this. It's actually hurting me right now. So yeah, all seriousness, I'm like, how did the initial idea for robot golf came about? Like, just like kind of first come about.
So this whole idea actually came from Panzer, who's the co-founder with me at the Goblin, and we'd finished Roundabout. We were working on the console ports of Roundabout while we were ramping up next game, and we had a couple of ideas that we might come back to, but none of them were like they were good ideas, but they weren't that like you see it and you're like, yes, this is the one. So we were messing around trying to find what that idea was, and Panzer does a bunch of Let's Plays as well. She's just finishing up a Life is Strange Let's Play right now. I'm going to check that out because I love Life is Strange. Yeah, she's doing a really good one. And she did a Saints Row Let's Play, which is absolutely fantastic. But she went and joined a Let's Play of Neo Turf Masters, which it's a golf game. It's an okay golf game. It's a little dry. Like it's like if you're LPing a game, like you kind of want like lots of interesting things to pull from to commentate on, and a 90s era golf game is kind of struggling for things to pull from to talk through. And so they're playing through this game, and all of the courses are like super wide and long, and there's like a waterfall, but it feels very empty. And one of the people in the LP was like, "Man, I really wish just like a mech would come out of that waterfall." And it's like, I wish there was just a mech golf game where I could play, I could play golf as a mech, and like everyone jokes like, oh yeah, okay, that's gonna be the next No Goblin game. Then it's a goofy robot golf thing, and so they finished that LP, and we actually have the clip of that in our press kit. And the Panzer finished the LP, and then like it sat for a day or two, and then she was like, maybe we should make Gundam Golf, and because that was like the nickname they came up with it in the LP. I was like, no, that's a terrible... No, we're not making a golf game. This is going to be terrible. And then it's just one of those ideas that just like it sticks in your head for a couple of days. And you're like, wait, this could be really, really, really cool. And so we started prototyping it. And like from very, very early on, it was just ridiculously fun. Like, because you'd have... like part of it is that there haven't really been any good, fun golf games for a while. Like... Power Star Golf was okay, but it's microtransactions everywhere. Rory McIlroy Golf is super, super serious, and like you have your 18 clubs to do something. But there hasn't been like a good, fun golf game in a while. And so building that for a start, and then putting in all of the fun stuff you can do with a robot, like knocking down buildings and doing destruction, it kind of opened up like all of these really fun like multiplayer and single player ideas that you could do around the game of golf. Actually, kind of reminds me of the there was an XCOM discussion with Jake Solomon, who was the lead on the new version of XCOM, where he was like, yeah, we basically built XCOM and it was boring, and then we started just pulling it apart and like making it fun for a modern audience, and that became the new XCOM. And it was kind of a similar process, but with a fun game to start with. Like we built a fun game of golf, and then originally it was turn-based because that's what golf games are like. And then at some point we're like, why don't we just take out the turns and just make it split screen? And so we did a split screen build, and this instantly, it just, like, everything clicked in a way that is very unnerving if you're a designer, because it's like when you first think you're on the right path, you're like, this is the right path, but here are the 12 things I need to fix or add to make this continue on this path. And we played 2-player split screen for the first time, and it was a moment where we were like, holy crap, this is fun as is, and I wouldn't change the tuning on like 3/4 of the things of this. This is amazing. It's like a playtest thing. It's like, this is amazing. What are we missing here? Like, what are we missing here that could make it even more amazing if this is how amazing it is at point one? And so that's kind of been us for like the last like 12 months. We got a couple more months to go, is that we've been going through and just building on that base and adding things.
We like I asked you earlier as well about the elevator pitch of World Games, and like you could go into detail like with World Games, whereas with the title 100-foot Robot Golf, it's just that's the elevator pitch right there. It's in the title.
It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful, and it's like the thing that like we came off Roundabout when we did a postmortem like just with Panzer and I were like, what are the things we want to fix for our next game? And one thing was polish, because obviously Roundabout was our first game as solo small developers, and so like we want to figure out a way to like add more polish to the game. And positioning, which was a big thing for us, especially coming off like making games for other people, is you don't really think about how you position in the marketplace as well as you do when your entire housing and food and everything depends on it. And so like, we need to position better than Roundabout, which was a spinning limousine in the 70s with FMV and a talking skeleton, which is like it turns into word salad at some point. And so with 100-foot Robot Golf, it's 100-foot robots playing golf. That's the positioning right there. Like that's our entire game. I don't need you to know what Kur is to know about this game, and it's absolutely wonderful. To be able to just say, we're making 100-foot Robot Golf and have people know exactly what your game is about. Like,
just mention it, like, we're making a game called 100-foot Robot Golf, and it's a first-person shooter. No, it's not.
I am sad, though, because, like, we wouldn't name the game this, but, like, there's a preview that went up recently that said it was, like, someone's, like, released the Golf Hounds, and, like, man, if we'd called it Golf Hounds, that would have been a really clever play on Chrome Hounds, and it would have been great. But like that's like that. No, 100-foot Robot Golf. It's the perfect name. It must not be touched.
When you put it like that, there, release the Golf Hounds. All I could think of was Mr. Burns saying, "Release the hounds."
Oh yes.
Fingers just instead saying, "Release the Golf Hounds."
Coming up with gold story ideas here. I still have to finish the script, so. Then they actually just sneak in now.
That you can have that one, but for a price.
Oh boy, this is how it starts.
this is how it starts exactly. This may be my foot in the door in terms of
additional writing by. But yeah, like it's been one of those surreal things where we know this game is going to be fun. Like we've played it ourselves. It's fun. We see people playing it. It's fun, and that's it's weird. It may sound weird to say, but that's a super rare thing when making games, because usually it's not until like the last chunk where everything comes together and fits into like a cohesive package. But it's been super surreal, like having this like LP joke idea turn into a game we're making. Then we pitched to Sony, and Sony's on board with it and brings us on and like announces this PlayStation experience, and then there's a huge crowd reaction to it that we weren't expecting, and Like we were at a party the other day, and someone was introducing us like, "Oh, this is Dan and Panzer. They work at No Goblin." Like, "Oh," and it's like they released Roundabout, and it's like, "Oh, cool. I'll have to check it out." And they're working on 100-foot robot golf right now. Oh wow, I love this. I love the trailer for that game. It's really cool. It's like, oh god, we haven't even released the game yet. I don't know. This is either going to be like this amazing huge explosion or like the biggest disappointment to a whole bunch of people. But yeah, knock on wood. I think it's going to be good.
To be fair, it's probably the Twitter reaction was just unreal. At least going from who I was following at the time for the announcement, it was just I had a lot of internet problems that day. Like the power just kept going out and just stop going out, and I just about tuned in time to see the trailer, and I was just Twitter was going nuts, and it was insane.
It was easily the craziest launch of a game I've been involved in. It's just like we were in the audience for that, and at the time we didn't know if we were going to make the cut of it, because like the whole way is like, we want to put you into this thing. You have these 5 milestones you have to clear every time. You have to clear every milestone to make it in. You're still tentative about whether you're going to make it in or not. So we're sitting in the audience next to our Sony rep, like looking at the teleprompter every 30 seconds, like, is this us? Are we going to be up next? Did we make it in? And then we made it in. Like, oh, that's a relief. We made it in. We get to see our logo on a huge screen. And then the trail plays, and everyone's like, you don't hear it in the video, but everyone is like applauding and cheering, and like robot goes in for a swing or like a melee attack, and everyone just like starts cheering again. And it was just like, it was surreal. It was incredibly surreal. And like, because I'm an idiot, I'm like, okay, I can push out like the Twitter announce and the other stuff from my phone once the thing gets announced. Like, it should be fine. Like we had a friend handle our website push, but it's like, I'll save the tweets in my drafts and push them out after the thing goes through. It'll be fine. And I'm sitting there afterwards, and my hands are just shaking, and I'm just trying to type. Our next game is 100-foot robot golf, and I'm just like shaking on this phone in this dark auditorium trying to push this tweet out. It was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous.
So you mentioned the fact that the working title was kind of Gundam Golf, but also as well in other interviews, like and I can never pronounce this as well. Evangelion, there we go. Was mentioned as an influence. Like, is there any other influences in terms of robot design going into it? Like, please, for the love of God, as someone who loves this series, please say Zone of the Enders was an influence.
There is some Zone of Enders influence, especially in the UI that we have right now. Like, I tried to pull a lot from that, like almost like Kojima style, like UI design. And so there's a little bit of that in the UI that's going around right now. But we have like our main touch points for the robots is it's the Rich team, the Eva team, the Jaeger team, and then we have this other team we're still trying to find a name for, but it's basically it's like a what's the right way to describe this? It's like a gearheady motorhead thing of like flames and like chrome and like things like that. That's really cool. And then we have some other surprises coming later, but it's been really cool. Just having cool robots come in as part of your job is like, this is awesome. I feel like I've chosen the right path in my career, that I can contract out someone to make really cool robots for us, and it's good. It's good as a mid-30s man to be able to have cool robots made for you.
You need to make a Jehuti. You need to make a Jehuti. I need a Jehuti. If Kojima is not doing his Only Enders free anymore, then this is as close as I'm going to get to Only Enders free. Damn it!
Well, Kojima's free right now. Like, if he wants to like partner up with us, like, I'll happily put one of his robots in if he wants to figure out a non-Konami infringing way to work with us. But I'm pretty sure he's busy right now. I'm sure.
Ending up on Robo Goblin, like, when exactly can we expect it to come out? Like, obviously you said 2016, like, when specifically?
Sometime in the months of 2016. Like, we're actually still working out what the release date is. It won't be this month, that's for sure. We're still working it out. Like, we we're a PlayStation VR title. Like, we don't even know when the PlayStation VR is coming out. I think, like, to be completely blunt, on our end, it's like we're going to wait for E3. We're going to see when all the release dates come out, and then once E3 is done, we're basically going to take a look at, like, the release schedule for every other game coming out in 2016, and then try and find, like, when is the best date for us to release this game. Like, it may be, the thing is like, oh, there's a window in early October that's perfect for us, or like maybe going in and doing a PlayStation VR same day launch might be good, but like we honestly don't know yet. Like, it's one of those things where, and we did the same thing with Roundabout as well. Like, we had a rough idea, but until E3 had happened, until we could find, I think it was September 18th for Roundabout, like there was just a big hole in the schedule there because everyone had moved out of the way for Destiny. And we're like, okay, well, we're going to take advantage of that and take that September 18 date, and we'll be like the only game of note, hopefully, coming out that week. And it kind of worked well for us. So we're going to try and hopefully do that again. I'm not guaranteeing September 18th because who knows when the games go out. But like we'll try and we'll survive E3, and then we'll pick a date.
Actually, I do have one more question about Robo Golf. Could I put a VR headset on a similar sized dog, similar to a corgi, namely my Westie, and have him play the game?
That's a good question. I think anything like that, what's that, like 30 pounds, 35 pounds? And them heads might be too small. Like, the biggest problem with VR is that, like, for kids and stuff, like, under 12, like, the pupil distance and stuff like that is not correct for VR. Maybe a bigger dog. If you were thinking of getting like a really big, like, I don't know, Saint Bernard or something, you could probably get a VR helmet on them, and then basically all your dreams would come true, as far as I know.
Okay.
Sir, you can't possibly be considering activating Project C. I'm telling you, there's no way! Look at her!
We're out of time. Prepare the other pilot.
So many things. Yeah, so obviously 100-foot robot golf coming out later this year on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation VR. Roundabout, our first game, is available where all good games are sold digitally. So Steam, PS4, Xbox One, Humble. We also do this thing called the Men of Game Development calendar, which is 12 very, very hunky and well game dev men in a very tasteful calendar that we put out every year. We have the 2016 calendar available at Men of Game Dev, and we're going to slowly be ramping up our 2017 stuff soon. So stay tuned to menofgamedev.com. What else can I promote? Oh, we have Sarge Club as well, which is we do Extra Life every year in early November, where we raise money for Seattle Children's Hospital by playing the absolute most terrible games. We did every Army Men game in a row for 25 hours. We did the worst Metacritic games in 2014, where we played the bottom 48 games from Metacritic. That was terrible. And last year we did, what did we do? Worst of the Best, which is basically we went to some of the best franchises and played the worst games from those franchises. So like Mortal Kombat Special Ops, for example. And so we've raised about $20,000 for the Seattle Children's Hospital so far, which is absolutely astounding. And we're going to start ramping that up in the next few months as well. So Even if you don't like hunky game dev men and the idea of playing as a 100-foot robot playing golf doesn't really appeal to you, at least tune in early November and donate money to kids. That'd be awesome. I'm Delicious Bees on Twitter, and co-founder Panzer is Panzer Skank on Twitter. And then we have nogoblin.com. I'm pretty sure we still have a Facebook page. And yeah, 100-foot robot golf on Twitter. We post all of our sort of in development stuff and pictures and cool stories and stuff on there. So check that out.
Thanks for listening to My Favourite Game. Next week, Alexo Ray Korea on Kingdom Hearts, Birth by Sleep. Until next week, bye bye.